Good afternoon, everybody. It's Martin Routledge here from In Control, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar of the Greater Manchester Preparing for Adulthood Network. And today's webinar is on improving employment outcomes, which of course is an important issue that many members of the network have raised and said that they would like to have a webinar on, hence here we are. And we're very lucky this afternoon to have two people with great experience in this area. We have Barry Jones from the National Development Team for Inclusion, and we have Amanda Noone from Pure Innovations. So straightforward webinar format. We're going to make a presentation for about 40 minutes. I'm going to record it so that people can watch it afterwards. And so I'd like to start off by inviting Barry to introduce himself and do the first part of the presentation. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Martin. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on improving employment outcomes. I'm Barry Jones. I'm the Northeast and Northwest Regional Preparing for Adulthood Facilitator. And let's just give you a quick overview of the webinar today. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the policy in the context and think around preparing for adulthood and employment pathways. We're going to take a look at the evidence base in terms of what works. We're going to have a think about supporting preparing for adulthood from the earliest of years and what that might mean in an educational health and care plan. And we're going to finish with focusing on what works. And then my colleague Amanda Noone from Pure Innovation will talk to us about all things supported internships, what they are, the principles and practice and various delivery models, thinking about employment engagement, staffing, job roles, how we recruit learners, and finally finish with some top tips. So Preparing for Adulthood is a programme that's delivered nationally by the National Development Team for Inclusion. We're commissioned by the Department for Education to roll out and support the implementation of the SEND reforms. And in essence, we're about working with local areas to ensure that we empower and enable children and young people to live gloriously ordinary lives now and in the future. If you haven't seen our website, the information is there. I would urge you to take a look. There's an abundance of information on the 4 preparing for adulthood pathways under the resources section, and we'll make sure all the information we share with you today is in the links of the webinar. So let's think about the context and the policy. So we know that the Children and Families Act is the biggest fundamental change to the SEND system in over a generation. And bringing this in has led to a different approach in terms of how we support children and young people with SEND and disabilities. And the system has helped to move us away from thinking about how much we do and thinking about inputs to focusing more on outcomes. So thinking more about how we empower and we enable and support children and young people to lead good lives now and in the future as they grow up. And we do this by taking a focus on people's strengths and abilities. So we take a strength-based approach, focusing on what matters to them as well as what's the matter and thinking about what's important to them. And that's at the place we start. The 4 preparing for adulthood pathways help us to do this, thinking about what a good life looks like, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And a major focus is now on employment, because we know that getting a job and a good job and holding on to that job is one key part of a good life, and we'll unpick that as we go through. So the code of practice, chapter 8, talks about preparing for adulthood and preparing for adulthood from the earliest of years. And the information graphic there on the screen talks about the 4 key aspects and 4 key pathways of preparing for adulthood. So employment, independent living, community inclusion, which in essence is friends and relationships, and finally health. Today we're going to be focusing on employment. And the first thing to say is the pathways are continuums and they're accessible by everyone. So what's really, really important is we all believe that employment is both possible and positive for all. And that's a bit of a non-negotiable. So that's moving away from the job readiness model, thinking that somehow we have to prepare at home or school or college and become ready for a job. We move away from that model to one of supported employment, which in essence believes that if we're old enough to work and we've got a desire to work, if we happen to need a bit of additional support, as long as we get that support, then we should be able to work. And that's what we're going to focus on today. The other thing to think about is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a continuum. So it means anything from, say, meaningful activity, earning permitted earnings alongside welfare state benefits, all the way through to being a director and owner of your own organisation and everything in between. I had a really nice example recently at a conference. Someone from the Northeast shared a story of someone who had a label of profound and multiple learning disabilities. He didn't really know what he was going to do with himself, and he was just about to leave education, and someone told him all about a supporting internship program, and he decided to give it a go. He started off as a records clerk in a local hospital, and he did that for a 9-10 month period, and at the end of his supporting internship he was awarded a job. He's just finished his first year in that role, and all year he's been living at home with his mom. He's been paying rent, and he's been saving all his money, all his wage every week, and he's literally just put a down payment on his own home 3 or 4 doors down from his mom. You know, an achievement that himself, his family, his community, and all of those that worked with him didn't think was likely. But actually, with the right support, he's been able to get a job and buy his own house and have the support he needs to lead a good life, which is exactly what preparing for adulthood and employment is all about. So whilst we know there are many individual children and young people leading good lives, we know there's more to do. We know we need to build on the good practice that exists and make sure we don't reinvent any wheels and learn from what's gone before us. We know we have to build and make really strong relationships and partnerships and develop strong connections, because ultimately it's about the community and the community of change around children and young people that enable people to access and get a job and hold on to that job. And we need to make sure that everyone working, whether they're paid or unpaid, in the local system understands that leading good lives are both positive and possible. And it's something that is non-negotiable. It's something we should be aiming for all children and young people, and that should be our starting point. We also need to ensure we help spread the word about what works. There's an abundance of information out there, and there are loads of best practice and case studies. We need to make sure that everyone working with children, young people and families, supporting them into employment, uses the evidence-based. Part of this is about using person-centered thinking and person-centered planning, and using these approaches and tools to help raise aspirations, to identify what inspires and motivates children and young people, what they want to do and be now and in the future, so they, their family, their communities and their paid support can all work together to enable that to happen. So if we were to take a think about the national initiatives that have been around and in place since 2000 to 2014, we'd see there's been a lot of various initiatives. All of these different things have one thing in common, and that's the importance they place on employment and the ability of a good job to enable someone to lead a good life. Unfortunately though, if you take a step back and look at the data and the statistics at a national level, children and young people with special education needs and disabilities and disabled adults known to adult social care, their statistics in terms of employment outcomes remain stubbornly and woefully poor. So there's a lot more we need to do. I've worked with lots of people over the years, and not one person has argued against this point, and everyone says it's terrible and we need to do something about it. And one of those things we need to think about is fighting and pushing back against the idea of progressive status quoism. So in essence, people won't argue that there aren't enough people in work who want work, but we often get stuck collectively at that point saying it's too difficult, it's too hard. However, much like Bill Mollison, the co-founder of the permaculture movement back in the 70s, the problems of the world are often complex, but the solutions remain embarrassingly simple. And I believe this to be the case for employment as well. So let's take a look at the employment support and the evidence base. So back in 2014, the National Development Team for Inclusion completed a 2-year research into local authority and National Health Service Commission's employment support for people with learning disabilities and mental health conditions. In essence, the research found that the vast majority of the public spending was and the money was being spent on types of employment support that were unlikely to lead people ever getting a job. So they weren't using the evidence base of what works, and they were funding generic the importance of understanding what the right conditions look like, what the right model is, and what we need to aim for. So thinking around the right conditions, At a local area level, we need to ensure there's a positive decision by key leaders across the partnership that makes employment a central strategic outcome. So something we all believe is possible and positive, and something we're going to focus our attention on. Then collectively as a partnership, once we've made this a strategic outcome, we're going to have to think about what do we mean by employment? What are we going to count? Is that employment, does that mean it's going to be paid or unpaid? How many hours a week would we be counting as employment? We'd need to understand our employment paths and our retention rates. So this isn't simply about getting people into work, but it's also about retaining them in work and then thinking about career progression throughout work. Once we've done that, we need to come together to create a strategic plan, and we need to understand all the key partners in the local area and their role, the role in delivering that plan. And then we need to ensure we're using the best practice to make sure that the providers and supporters in the system are well challenged and support to deliver the intention in terms of getting more people into work. And finally, we need to make sure we've got an agreed set of performance data that we can all support and challenge each other on, so we can understand how much we're doing, how well we're doing it, and then the big question, so what? How many people are getting into a job and staying in work? Then, if we're thinking about those with special education needs, disabilities and learning disabilities, the right model, put simply, is the using supported employment. And we'll talk about that in a little while. The research was primarily focused on adults and on supported employment models. And they said what we should be aiming for back in 2014 is funding in the region of £2,000 to £4,000 per job outcome. Around 50% of people being supported should be moved into work, and people need to ensure we focus on not just getting a job, but keeping a job and then progressing through the workplace. So if we were to think more focused in on special education needs and disabilities, what do we know that works around employment? Well, we know high aspirations from an early age is absolutely vital. Everyone needs to believe that employment is possible and positive for all. If they're old enough and they want to work, they should be able to work with the right support and the right employer. It's not about work readiness. We know from the absolute latest, from year 9, education, health and care plans and reviews must include preparing for adulthood pathways and aspirations about employment. And this could be supported by using person-centered tools such as vocational profiles, which I'll come on to in a little while. We know that access to high quality work experience and work tasters are vital to be able to give people the opportunity to begin to experience work, begin to think about what they like and don't like doing and what they might like to do and be in the future. Equally, we know having access to disabled adults who work in the local area to inspire and be role models for younger people can be hugely beneficial too. And having supported employment expertise to work with children and young people who want to get into the world of work is absolutely essential, and that they work closely in partnership with all other sectors and settings locally. So support employment. It was a model created in the USA, and it's evidence-based, and there's lots of facts and figures behind it that shows and proves that it works. And in essence, it's there to support people with learning disabilities and other disabled people into the open job market and to get a job. The model's based on placing someone with an employer, training that person, and then phasing that support away as quickly and safely as possible so that person is supported by natural supports, be that managers or peers in the workplace. So the key components of support employment are vocational profiling. So this is where a job coach works with a young person or an adult, understands their likes, their dislikes, their unique skills, gifts and talents, as well as their needs, and what jobs and what careers they might like to do in the future, and begin to think about what their local and family connections are and use that information to begin to find a job and begin to match a possible opportunity. The job coach would go into that place of work, they would do a job analysis, so they'd identify the kind of rules and regs, as well as the job culture and work environment, and begin to sort the placement out. The job coach would learn the role that the person would be undertaking themselves. They would then see what the person could do for themselves, and they would begin to think about any training strategies they might need to put in place using things like training and systematic instruction. And then over time, they would train that person as well as the support around them and look to phase away so the person is employed in the job and maintaining that job by themselves. The other thing we've come to learn around support employment is absolutely vital to have the right support once the job coach moves away. As similarly, it's really important we have the access to welfare rights can be really, really vital. So before people actually start in the world of work, understanding what that means in terms of theirs and their family benefits can be hugely beneficial. And having access to things like better off in work calculations can be really helpful there. So let's think about preparing for adulthood from the earliest of years and what this might look like in an education, health and care plan. So when we're working with young people, they might be talking about wanting a job when they leave school or college. And some outcomes that examples of this might be for example, here by December 2020, they'll have a vocational profile that sets out what they're good at, what type of employers need their abilities and skills, and what support they might need when they leave school. That they'll have a communication plan in place so colleagues can understand how they communicate and how they make themselves understood. And they begin to think about how they travel around the local community by either walking or using a bus with the support and help they may need. And in this example, by July 2020, have 4 meaningful work experiences in a range of employers and settings. They have a good understanding of different types of job roles. And then in September, they'll start and begin a support internship. Some examples of steps towards these outcomes are they'll begin to travel around the local community on the bus. They'll have a block of work experiences in the summer. They'll take a visit to the local college with their family to have a look at the support internship course. And that was focused on post-16, but in the code it talks about preparing for adulthood from the earliest of years. So what would this mean for, say, a child 0 to 4? Well, steps towards an outcome around employment would be things like following instructions, adapting to new environments, playing with other children and learning to share, and things like real-world play. In terms of key stage 1 and 2, so children from the ages of 5 through to 11, steps towards the outcome of employment might be numeracy, real-world visits, so understanding the types of jobs and careers in the local environment and local community, having conversations about what they want to do and be when they grow up, meeting inspiring role models, talking about different careers and education options that are available to them in the future, and having access to career-related role models. So people that might have been previous students or pupils who come back and talk to them about what they've achieved and what they're doing. And where children begin to start building their own personal profiles about what their interests and ambitions are using various person-centered tools. And where schools have sessions from visitors on their chosen careers. So some examples of provision and support, if we go back to thinking about post-16, might be where someone accesses a study program with the work experience, where, let's say, a pre-16 school curriculum is being put in place to help with travel training. So we know where people can move around the local community and get to and from work. It's an absolutely vital element of being able to get a job and hold that job down. And an example here of a communication book so people know how to support them in the work experience. And then we have other examples around health provision and social care provision. So thinking about focusing on what's working, we know that raising aspirations is absolutely vital, as is the presumption of employability. So every child, young person, family, community, and people working with them in terms of paid and unpaid supporters are presuming that everyone will work. That kind of supported employment model rather than the work readiness model. And having the ability to think, well, what will it take to enable this to happen? Where family and the team around the family talk with children and young people regularly about their aspirations and do they start those conversations early? That helps to normalize conversation around growing up and the expectation of a job. And where young people actually see other people with similar disabilities and similar needs and interests to their own who act as inspiring role models. And when family members get to meet other family members where their children, young people are living good lives. And all of this information is available locally on the local offer, so people can begin to make informed decisions about the future. I've already mentioned that from year 9, at the very latest in terms of the code of practice, that preparing for adulthood outcomes must be embedded throughout the education, health and care plan. And as early as possible, employment aspirations and outcomes must be captured in the education, health and care plan. We've heard about vocational profiles and how powerful they are, and they're really helpful tools to be using with all children and young people, but especially those from year 9 onwards. We know where young people have access to high quality work experience and work tastes whilst at school. This is really, really helpful, so people can begin to think about what they want to do and be in the future, and begin to identify their likes and dislikes in terms of the work environment. Where people who are on employment pathways have access to high skilled and highly qualified job coaches, or job coaches who are working towards becoming qualified, this is absolutely vital. They're undertaking a specialised role, and it's right and proper that the people doing so are supported and trained to do so. We wouldn't expect or accept a child or young person being taught by a non-qualified teacher at school all the time, and we certainly shouldn't be accepting job coaches who aren't qualified to be supporting people who are on employment pathways. We also know where schools and colleges embed preparing for adulthood throughout the entire curriculum, and all the support planning focuses on employment can be really, really helpful. Similarly, where they've got access to high quality careers advice. We've already mentioned the importance of welfare rights and advice. So, you know, early on in the young person's sort of educational career, they should be looking at, if appropriate and if needed, what welfare rights advice they can access, and even undertake better off in work calculations before they start things like support internships. So we don't get to the end of an internship and begin to move into employment and begin to think about benefits as a potential barrier at that point. We should break those barriers down really early. We know, hopefully, as I demonstrated, that the support employment model of place, train and phase, it works. That's the evidence-based. Let's ensure that the colleges and the employment programs that we're commissioning to enable people to access the world of work use the evidence base. The other thing we know that works is when the local authority leads from the front. So they use their circles of influence, and they think about the various partners that they might have around the special education needs and disability partnership board or the health and wellbeing group, and they think and see themselves as a group of employers and say, what are we doing locally to provide opportunities for work tasters, work experience, support internships, for apprenticeships? What are we doing to support our staff to go into and have conversations with schools and colleges about the type of career opportunities that we have? Equally, what are we doing then as a partnership to make that opportunity available to the people we spend our money with and we procure services from through using the Social Value Act? Other things we know that work are the Disability Confident Employers Register. So we can access a national list of all employers in the local area that are signed up to be disability confident, and that can be a good starting place to start conversations locally. There are also other local organisations that people can access that can be helpful in terms of employment engagement. So those are the business in the community and the Chamber of Commerce and Enterprise. And the other thing that we know works is about building capacity. So over the last few years, the central government have given one-off grants called Section 31 grants to ensure that we build capacity locally for supporting internships, increase the amount of job coaches that are trained and have forums locally. So finally, I'd like to think about another challenge we've got, and that is challenging people's limiting beliefs and assumptions. This idea that no one would disagree that helping and enabling people into the world of work is a good thing, but actually those that push back and say, yeah, but we need to get real. Well, actually, there'll be lots of people out there, Amanda being one of them, that have had several conversations with employers. Now, I'm not going to read all of these out, but this is what employers are telling us and saying to us. You know, that working with people through internships or apprenticeships isn't a charitable act. It gives you an employer a competitive edge. And I'm meeting and speaking with more and more employers that are seeing supported internships as a talent pipeline, often in entry-level roles where organisations are struggling to recruit and retain staff. They're now using support internships as a way to plug their talent gap and bring people into their organisation that the traditional recruitment practices simply wouldn't allow. So they're very much seeing it as a new opportunity. Finally, I'd like to share that there's an abundance of information out there. There's the British Association Support Employment, and that's BASE, their website. There's the Preparing for Adulthood website, and if you click on resources and go into an employment section, there's loads of case studies, best practice guidance videos, toolkits, how-to guides. There's lots of information out there that what works. So if this is an area of interest for you, I'd encourage you to take a look at the evidence base and ensure what you're doing is based on what we know makes that difference. So that's it from me. I hope that's been helpful. I'm just going to hand over to Amanda now to take us through what they're doing in terms of support internship in the Greater Manchester area. Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Barry and Martin. Delighted to be speaking to everybody today about support internships because we are achieving fantastic outcomes for young people. So I work for Pure Innovations, and amongst other things, we're a supported employment organisation, but I've been actively involved in delivering supported interns for about 10 years now. Sorry, Barry, my slides are not working. Can you assist? I'll carry on. So just to backtrack a little bit, supported internships, as many of you know, are a type of study programme specifically aimed at young people aged 16 to 24 who have an educational healthcare plan. And providers, what the Department of Education will say is providers can design their supported internship programme to fit their local circumstances and to meet the needs of learners. However, there are a set number of principles that we need to follow. The first one being the majority of an intern's time must be spent at an employer's premises. Placement should comply with real work conditions, and where appropriate, on-the-job learning must take place. And this is by a professional that's trained in systematic instruction. The second principle is where interns must undertake learning alongside their work placements, including relevant maths and English. The third principle is placements must meet the needs of both the intern and the employer, and the placement must fit the intern's vocational profile, career aspirations, and be adjusted to meet their needs. And for an employer, it must meet and real business need. That end bit is really crucial because actually to convert placements to paid employment, the employer must see that it is a business need. And the final principle is to support young people and an employer on the job via job coaching. And this should be ongoing and still provided once employment is required. And you can do this via access to work funding. So how does that work in practice? Well, just to kind of talk a little bit more about Pure and myself, well, we've been doing supported internships now for around 10 years, and we currently work with 7 colleges delivering 11 group supported internship sites. So the group supported internship site is when it works with about 10 young people. So that means in essence we're delivering over 100 places per year for young people with educational healthcare plans to access supported internships. And what I will go on to is how the supported employment model does underpin the supported internship programme. And I think in essence, that's how you get really good outcomes. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to try and touch briefly on the following, which is some of the different models, the importance of employer engagement, staff and job roles, getting the right interns, and a couple of top tips. Okay, so delivery models. Department of Education will say there's 2 different models. There's lots of flexibility within the models, but just for ease, the first one being the group internship model. Now that is Pure's preferred model, if you like, for a number of reasons, but logistically it's easier to deliver, so looking at your staff resources, and also it's more efficient in regards to funding. But it's really dictated by the number of interns you have. So to run a group model internship, we would say you ideally need around about 5 young people. And that's where you will work with one large employer in your area who will provide multiple and diverse placements for you to work with. Ideally, they'll gift a classroom to you. Some organisations call it a base room. This will allow the internship to be entirely delivered on site with the employer, and hopefully the young person then won't need to touch base with the college. Ideally, interns will have 2 or 3 placements within that large employer, but the third placement, which is really your third term of that academic year, is actually on a working interview with the large host employer, but if not, with other local employers. So how that works in essence for us is, let's choose a large employer. So one of the organisations we work with is the Manchester Airport. They will do their first 2 placements within the Manchester Airport. If we don't feel that there is a paid outcome there, that third placement will be working into with another local employer that we've already been working with to ensure we get as many people into paid work as possible. The second model is where it's an individual internship model, and that's where I find this is probably more of a popular one to use, and this is where a college may have just a couple of young people that they feel are ready for a supported internship. And what they will then do is it's quite person-centred, so you might have somebody that wants to do catering, and the college will then go and find a placement in catering for that young person, and then they may then have a couple of young people all with different employers in the local area. They don't tend to do lots of placements over the year. It might even just be one throughout the year, but the skills and the role is developed over time. The pro for this is it's really person-centred. The difficulty and what we're finding from research is actually the conversion into employment using this model is a lot harder, and I think that's purely because it's one person in one employer, and it's that conversion to paid employment is just a little bit tricky for colleges to do. But some colleges can combine the two. But if you have more than 5 interns, I would really recommend the group model, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit more now. Okay, so what does our group model look like? Well, we normally base it on around 10 or 12 interns. It operates over 4 days a week, normally Monday to Thursday. We start at the very beginning by marketing large employers, so somebody in your area that offers that real diverse of placements. We start, it probably takes between 6 and 12 months to get this up and running, but don't let that put you off, because actually working with a large range of employers takes as much work. But we start really with your corporate and your senior leadership team. So we're getting strategic agreement right at the top. There's a policy exchange that happens, letters of engagement, things like that. So they're really buying into the initiative. And then we look at what the project champions are. What that actually means is that your operational team that you're delivering your supported internship, so it might be that you have a tutor, it might be you had a project lead and a job coach, they're the operational team that do the operations. From the large employer, you need a champion, and they're the people that introduce you to the culture of the workplace, or what different departments to start with and to highlight, open doors or help with issues when they occur. But in general, hopefully what they're the face of the programme from an employer's perspective. Promotion and launching the internship's really, really key. You want everybody to know about it. It's a fantastic thing to be involved in. Employers want to do programs like this. They're just a little bit nervous about how to do it and how to do it right. So promotion, ensuring that everybody knows, and supported internships launching in September. Come and meet our young people. And hopefully, like I said before, the entirety of the course is delivered at the host employer. So you'll have young people from day one with the right uniform and the right ID badge, ready to start their work placements. And like any new project or any strategic project, you'll have lots of regular reviews and you'll have steering meetings, and that ensures your project is on track. And in that steering meeting, you are going to have the employer there and the college and other local partners. The next part there is around what your kind of placements can look like, and it's just to give you an idea of how we expect that young person to grow over time. So on here it looks quite rigid, so we have they're in terms, if you like, work placement 1, 2 and 3, but it's more fluid than that. So in September we have 10 interns that will start with us, but they all won't go out to work at the same time. We stagger it over a number of weeks, and then it becomes a little bit more fluid as we get through the year. But the rotation 1, so placement 1, you'll notice it's much more hand-holding of a young person and with the organisation as well. So we're setting standards, we're looking at a young person's capability, we're building their skills and their independence once they're on the job and getting to the placement, and we're constantly reviewing somebody's support needs. The second placement, as you'll see, is more around someone's progression and development, how they're getting on in work. Are they demonstrating their own understanding of the work ethic and personal responsibility? We'll do an aspirations check. Let's go back to that vocational profile. Let's make sure it's still really capturing. Now they've had more experience, are we on the right career track here? And we commence paid work, searching for paid work. And then the final placement, hopefully someone is much more independent in the workplace. They're on their 3rd different placement, but not everybody has 3 placement. If someone has 2 placements, loves it, feels that this is their choice of career, then obviously we will continue in that placement and look at how we can build their skills further. But then this 3rd rotation is very much around working interviews and job trials. And every young person should have a progression and exit strategy. I'm going to bring you back to commencing paid employment, because One of the things I would say to you is many years ago, we started job searching in April. Actually, now we job search right from the very, very start, but from the minimum is around about January, because the whole objective of supported internship is somebody goes into sustainable, rewarding employment. So let's start that from the January. And what's great is that most of our colleges are really flexible about that now, and that is the right approach. So if somebody gets paid job in January and it's full time, the colleges will look at how they can be flexible about the qualification. It might be they offer different hours, or they condense it so the person comes out with the qualification and the paid outcome. And this kind of model, what we're getting at the moment is 70% outcomes. So 70% of our interns go into paid employment, which I have to say we're incredibly proud of. But that's because the model works. So with the right employer, with the right interns, with really good supported employment methodology underpinning your internship, you will get high levels of outcomes. Okay, so I'm going to just leave this really in a slide for you to have a look at, but that's just an example timetable. And what that demonstrates is every learner's with us about 6.5 hours a day, and the majority of their time is spent on the job. Okay, so employer engagement, and this is the little bit really where I think that we're hoping to bring a little bit something different to you around why it is so incredibly crucial, because colleges can create fantastic study programs with some really good work experience, and you'll have your maths and English in there, but actually employer engagement is the element of this that makes it different, and this conversion into employment is what makes your study program also understand the values of supported employment. So ongoing work around employers right throughout the start. You're building a broad range of network of employers that can offer you something. Please train your staff in employer engagement as well. It can be quite difficult. It's a real specialism, if you like. So ensure that if you are a college that's doing it independently, your staff have gone on training around supported employment, understanding the methodology and the approach, understanding training and systematic instruction, and understanding how we can assist employers with actually what they already have the appetite to do. Market employers using a variety of different methods and mediums is really important. I've set up 9 of our 11 supported internships, and what I would say is if you get to the right person, they definitely want to do it. It's actually getting through the gatekeeper is probably the trickiest bit. Do your fact finding, understand what employers' business needs are, where are the skill shortages, what is their staff turnover like, so that you can take that information and look at what are the skill sets of your interns that are coming through your employment pathways at college. Agreeing roles and responsibilities is really important. Identifying champions, which I touched upon before, around ensuring that you've got a really key person within your in the employer organisation. Present about the amazing outcomes that you can get on supported internships within management meetings. And this can be a range of meetings. The more people within an organisation that understands what a supported internship is, the more doors that will open for you to be able to go in there and work out in that department what are the skills that are needed to match your young person. Good thing is a lot of employers want disability awareness training and other similar training. So if you can deliver this is great. You can do quite generic disability awareness training, or you can then personalise it to the intern that's going into that department. So it's a little bit of using that pen picture of ensuring that somebody understands what the skills are of these young people, but also what are the similarities and the communication aids that we may need, or what are the hobbies that the young person has, just so people feel really, really familiar with that young person that's coming into the department. As Barry mentioned before, job analysis is really key. So ensuring you understand every task and component of that role, so you can then go away and ensure you have a young person that can do that role. And if not, go back and revisit it with that department manager and look at your reasonable adjustments or customising that role to ensure that you've got somebody that can match. So it's about that good job match again. Identifying potential department placements, including spare ones. So our rule of thumb at Pure is if we've got 10 interns, we'd have about 15 placements. You're going to need something, you'll need a contingency plan to ensure you've got a little bit of flex if things haven't quite worked out as you hoped they would. But that's okay with employers, as long as you explain to them that they are spare ones and you may or may not use that placement. And then it's around your key documentation. Whenever I present to employers, I always get asked by someone in the room about health and safety and how we're going to keep our young people safe. So we just complete normal mandatory paperwork, risk assessments, health and safety checks, training plans, and so on. Okay, so staffing and job roles. So this comes back to supported employment really, and around ensuring that you have the right skill set within your team. So it's really important that you have staff with a variety of skills and experience. Now, whether you're a college that is delivering an internship independently or whether you're working with a partner that has got supported employment specialist, it goes back to the expertise. And one of the UK pilots around research into supported internships was saying that conversion rate was quite difficult for some colleges about getting the paid outcomes. And I think that goes back to it's project critical really that they do undertake the training around supported employment training and systematic job coaching and employer engagement. Okay, thank you. On this bit here, this was just for ease really. So not every operational team will look like this, but this is how Pure's team work. So on every supported internship, we have the tutor, which is from the college. We have a supported employment practitioner, which is our employment officer, and then we have a job coach. Now, there's a slight difference there between sometimes what Department of Education will class as a job coach. It's for us, it's that practitioner and job coach, it's the merge of that one role. But just to look at the different skill sets. So our supported internship tutor, as you can imagine, is from the college and it's all about the course and the quality of the course and ensuring it maps to the outcomes of a supported internship. So recruitment of the learners, delivering the learning programme. Every college delivers a different qualification. Some don't deliver a qualification at all. It might be more RAPA or it might be particular occupational qualifications. They track the progression of the learners. They'll do placement tracks, lead on all the pastoral support, lead on any education-based decisions, and we'll be a joint operation decision maker. For us, we lead, if you like, on all the employer elements of it and all the bits that happen on the job. So the employer negotiation and all the engagement, we look at what the market trends are. Going back to that job match before, we do placement reviews. We're commissioned to ensure that we do get job outcomes. So before I mentioned the 70%, I would say that our provision for a supported internship, as a minimum, you need to aim for about 50%, but obviously you really want to get 100%. We lead on the placement decisions and we make some of the joint operation decisions with the college. And then we have our specialised job coaches, and over the summer period for us it's really important before our interns join us in September. And in that summer period, we will be looking at doing the travel training to ensure that people can get to their placements. We've worked out what kind of support they'll need on the job. So we'll have those training plans. So the job coach will do job support using training and systematic instruction, coaching and mentoring. And on some sites, the job coach also acts as a TA. So we'll do the support in the classroom, but just a word of warning, that can't be funded through Access to Work. Okay, so recruitment of learners. Because we've been doing this for quite a while now, what is great is practically all of our group internship sites are now oversubscribed. So we do a practical assessment and a one-to-one informal chat with everybody that applies. It should be really informal, really interactive, and hopefully quite a bit of fun as well. And that's where we're looking for young people that are really motivational, are really quite mature and really ready for work, because being on a supported internship, we hope, is their final year of college and they really want to go into work. We need to ensure that we do lots of work with parents and young people in advance of this though, and parents are really key in this. We want them to understand what the benefit of a supported internship is. We'll get people that have been previous interns that will come on those events as well and speak to parents. Barry mentioned before about welfare benefit advice, again, really crucial, and I'm sure lots of people are nodding their head while they're listening to this. So we do get benefit checks done whilst somebody is still in education, and then if they get offered a job, what will the difference be when they're getting a salary? Hopefully getting over the misconception that everybody's worse off, which isn't the case at all. Sometimes it's a break-even point, but again, that'll be illustrated in a benefit calculation. We want young people that are motivated and reliable. their disability or health condition doesn't matter at all to us. We genuinely believe, and again, I think Barry mentioned this before, it's about that presumption of work, that people can work with the right role and with the right support. We mentioned travel before, so the ability to travel independently is a real plus. We ask that most people undertake some kind of travel training, and if they will always need some support with travel, then access to work can be looked at, and sometimes we have had parental or carer support with that as well. Okay, to more or less finish, we've got a couple of top tips for you. So we've said we achieved 70% over the last 5 years. And that's just to kind of demonstrate what kind of outcomes you can have, and that's across lots of different industry sectors. And some of our top tips would be, again, high proportion of your time should be spent on employer engagement and understanding what the business needs are. Always have a number of standby placements. Be clear throughout that paid employment is the goal, and this is with everybody, whether you're speaking to a parent, a young person, or whether you're speaking to an employer. Understand reasonable adjustments and how they can be used. Promote working interviews and creative recruitment practices. We know that most of our young people will not flourish in a one-to-one traditional interview, and actually working interviews allows them to demonstrate their talent. Employers want to send young people, but need specialist advice and guidance. And finally, over-supporting with job coaching is just as detrimental as under-supporting. The message you're giving to your employer is that your young person needs lots of support. When actually, as a professional, if we get that right, the balance right of what kind of support is needed, and fade as quickly as we can, allowing that person to undertake that role independently, that's getting the message across to the employer very quickly that they're able to do this role. And then the final slide, I won't go through this in detail. There's just a little bit more information for you, some really good networks to get involved in. There's also a video there if you want to see one of Pure's sites in action to give you some ideas, and my contact details as well. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, and good luck with your supported internships. And back to you, Martin.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thanks, Barry, and thanks, Amanda. That was really fantastic, useful. I'm sure they'll also have lots of questions as well, and obviously in normal circumstances we'd now be going to those questions, but I don't think we could get much further away than from normal times than where we are now. But I do hope that both of you would some questions that we gather from people when we put this on the site, and invite them to ask questions, because we'll carry on with the network a little bit further into the spring. So I hope you both be up for doing that. But let me just say once again, thank you so much for doing that, finding the time, and doing a fantastic webinar. So thank you very much.